Bonjour tout le monde. Good morning, everyone. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm addressing you from the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Treaty 13 lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. I want to express my gratitude for all that I have learned from Indigenous peoples in how to care for this land, water, people, plants, and animals who live here. Last week, the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation was a day to listen, learn, and reflect on the traumatic, dark, and racist legacy that we are reminded of every time new unmarked graves are uncovered in this country. And I want to reaffirm the Green Party's commitment to the truth and reconciliation process, which is vital to combating colonialism and systemic racism. It is clear we are in a climate emergency. The IPCC is clear. Unless huge cuts are made to climate pollution, we are headed straight into a climate catastrophe with unprecedented consequences. At the same time, Ontario is neck deep in a housing affordability crisis. It takes the average minimum wage worker 63 hours of work just to be able to afford a one-bedroom apartment in Barrie, 55 hours in Kingston. And this is the same in communities across the province. To save for a down payment on a house, it takes the average Ontarian 15 years just to save for a down payment on a house. And right now, over 16,000 people across the province don't even have a place to call home. But you would not know this listening to the Monday's throne speech. The uninspiring speech did not have a single mention of the housing affordability crisis or the climate emergency. Instead, according to the throne speech, Doug Ford's solution is to build more highways. Highways like 413 that will supercharge sprawl, climate pollution, and only make the housing affordability crisis worse. Paving over the farmland that feeds us and the wetlands that protect us. We don't need more highways. We don't need more sprawl. Transportation is the biggest source of climate pollution in Ontario, and a big portion of that comes from cars commuting long distances. No one wants to spend hours every day away from family and friends just commuting to and from work. But the housing affordability crisis is pushing Ontarians further and further away, going longer and longer distances just to be able to find a place to call home. That means longer commutes, more cars on the road, more urban sprawl, and more pollution. And that's why yesterday I tabled a motion calling on the government to tackle the housing affordability crisis that's leading to more sprawl, while at the same time addressing the climate emergency. So together we can greatly reduce pollution and tackle the housing and climate emergencies that we are facing in Ontario. Ontario Greens have a plan to build 15-minute communities where all of life's core necessities like grocery stores, pharmacies, schools, offices, parks, green space, and libraries are just a 15-minute walk, bike ride, or transit ride away. This can be achieved by revising land use rules to incentivize infill development, gentle density, and building safe, healthy neighborhoods that prioritize people. Neighborhoods where we can live, work, and play. There's lots of existing space available within urban boundaries. So it's about creative use of land. It's about building duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes, walk-up apartments, laneway houses, and tiny homes. Along with lowering pollution by reducing sprawl and protecting our green spaces, 15-minute communities also support local businesses and boost both physical and mental health. But the current government would rather supercharge sprawl and build more highways. And so I challenge all parties to jump on the green bandwagon, embrace our plan to address the housing affordability and climate crisis by utilizing all tools available to stop sprawl. We are in a climate emergency. We're out of time. And we need this government and all parties in this legislature to take the climate emergency seriously. We need to start looking at Ontario's most pressing issues, like housing affordability, through a climate lens so that we can address the impending catastrophe the IPCC is predicting. And a good way to start is by treating the housing affordability crisis like the climate emergency that it is. I'm happy to take questions.
Ladies and gentlemen on the phone, as a reminder, should you have any questions, please press star 1. Your first question comes from Adam Donaldson with Guelph Politico. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Mike, I think you'll know what question I'm going to ask, but this what you're talking about this morning is kind of at 100, and as you yourself stated, the provincial government in their throne speech did not address either climate change or affordable housing in their throne speech, which would probably put them at a 0. So, I mean, how do you propose to sort of make this a political priority in the government beyond just having your announcement this morning?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Adam, and good morning. By applying political pressure on government, it is clear that the only way we can get Premier Ford to do the right thing is to build political pressure. I remember last summer when I was the first political party leader, first MPP to speak out against Highway 413 and fast-tracking the environmental assessment process. I can't tell you how many local politicians said to me, "It's great that you're speaking out against this, but there's no way you're going to stop this highway." And 8 months later, we had the other two opposition parties joining us in calling for the Ford government to halt Highway 413. We had numerous municipal councils and regional councils, even some that had previously supported the highway, speaking out against it. And now we have a federal environmental assessment. So it's that kind of political pressure that we have to put on the government to address the climate emergency and the housing affordability crisis. The Premier prorogued Parliament, saying that we need to respond to the federal election. Well, two of the top issues outside of how to address the pandemic that were raised during the federal election by all political parties, frankly, was the need to address the climate crisis and the housing affordability crisis. And so it's time now for the Premier to step up and put forward plans that address both of these issues.
I do have a follow-up. Looking at it from the other way, what opportunities do you think, because, I mean, this plan you're talking about can't be done solely with provincial direction. I mean, it would require coordination with the federal government and municipalities as well. So what kind of opportunities are there that you're seeing that all three levels of government can work together towards this agenda you're talking about?
Well, I'll start with a very concrete example in Guelph. So funding the permanent supportive housing proposals in Guelph. The federal government has stepped up. The private sector has stepped up. Social service agencies, nonprofit organizations have stepped up. We have a capital campaign now that both the United Way and Community Foundation are working on. And we now need the provincial government to step in with provincial funding for permanent supportive housing, not only in Guelph, but in communities across Ontario. So that's one concrete example that I think that all three levels of government can work on together to address pressing needs in communities across Ontario and certainly within Guelph.
As a reminder, if you should have any questions, please press star 1. Your next question comes from Graham McNaughton with Guelph Mercury Tribune. Please go ahead.
Sorry, I forgot to turn my mute off there. So the other day, there was a motion passed with the City of Toronto looking at reducing for higher density housing, reducing the amount of parking that would be allowed, and therefore insinuating that people would be wanting to walk more or take transit. But there's other changes that could be made by the province through through the Planning Act. Do you feel that this would be one of the avenues that you could tackle through this plan?
Yeah, absolutely, Graham. I think one of the reasons the Ontario Greens housing strategy that we released in June received such high reviews, including the Toronto Star editorializing that was a masterclass plan, are the proposals we've made in terms of eliminating minimum parking requirements in new buildings. That's something that even organizations like the Ontario Home Builders have endorsed because it would lower building costs to make homes and apartments more affordable for people. It'd be good for the environment, be good for creating more livable, people-centered communities. But we've also called for zoning changes that would enable gentle density within neighborhoods, which is critically important not only in Toronto, but in communities across the province, like Guelph. And we've also talked about ways that the province can assist municipalities in developing Yes in My Backyard campaigns, which will be vital to making sure that we have the kind of gentle density we need to provide affordable housing without paving over farmland, wetlands, and other critical environmental features. And I'll have to say that, I've been very impressed with organizations like the Ontario Federation of Agriculture and other farm-based organizations, many of them who are headquartered in Guelph, who have been speaking out on the need for this type of a housing strategy so that we can permanently protect prime farmland, which obviously is needed to feed Ontarians, but is also vital to our